Alright, imagine. You spawn in an interchange. You run inside with your pistol and kit. You see no one around, so you start to bolt for the loot. Then once you actually get there, boom! You get the clapped by a guy sitting behind a box. Then back at your stash, you're thinking to yourself, dude, I'm actually fucking unlucky. And then that's the moment when you finally get out Tarkov after your first raid because you already don't want to play. And see, what you didn't realize was where you spawned. See, you may have thought of spawning right next to the door, basically, but what you didn't notice was that you spawned a little bit farther away than the spawn that spawns next to the door. So when the first guy walked in, he didn't purposely think of ratting you. He just heard this from the front door. He just decided to stay back because, you know, that would have been the smart thing to do, okay? And so the better option for you at that point should have been turning your ass around and going on a cache run. So in Tarkov, if you don't know what a cache is, it's basically just a loot spot. But instead of being a weapons case or a toolbox, it's usually hiding in a bush or around a corner somewhere. And so there are two types of caches, where one of them is a underground barrel cache, and the other is a more hidden ground cache. And what's so special about these loot spots is that basically anything can spawn in it. And yes, including guns, graphics cards, and even a LED-X. Even though it probably will never happen to you, but there's still a chance. And so for this one, I'm going to be focusing on the map of Interchange for caches. One, because it's one of my favorite maps, and two, I feel like it's one of the maps where you can decide if you want to go in or stay outside for the caches. Mainly because of the way it's built, with all the main loot being inside or at the center of the map. And yes, you can say this for any kind of map like woods and shoreline, but at the same time, Interchange is much of a smaller map, so you can get to all the caches faster, instead of going through the whole entire map of like, say, shoreline or customs, even though that there's many more caches there. And on the plus side, if you do actually go on a cache run on Interchange, most of the people would be inside already. So first thing you want to have is a good map knowledge of Interchange. And really all you need to know is all of the spawns in Interchange and all the cache spawns if you're just wanting to go for a cache run, which I'll just be explaining those two in this video. And so there's around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 spawns at Interchange. And when I say around, I mean when you usually look up a picture of Interchange spawns, you usually find 15, but for me, I've seen 16 of them, in which the last one is kind of BS, but in a good way. But I'll explain when I show all the spawns. And so main thing you want to know about these spawns is that they're very short. And so when you're going on a loot run or a cache run, you have to be aware of the spawns right next to you so you can avoid players at all costs. Or you would reroute yourself so you wouldn't come into contact with players later on in the raid. And so before I show you all the spawns and whether or not you should go on a cache run or a loot run, first I'm going to show you all of the caches in Interchange. So there are a total of 18 caches on Interchange. Some of these caches are really close to each other, like the ones near Railway Extract, but all the caches are mainly outside of the mall. That's why when you do a cache run, there's a high chance that you're going to run into no one because most people are going to be inside. So the first cache is going to be on the Emercom checkpoint side. And this one is going to be outside of the gate near the Emercom Extract, and it's going to be located near some rocks. The next two are going to be in a camp near the ramp that leads into Emercom. And so in the camp, look for the green boxes around it. And that's where the caches are going to be, which one of them is going to be an underground one, and another one is going to be a barrel. And so running along the blue wall with the other camp with the red bag in it, you'll eventually find the fourth cache in a bush. To explain where this is specifically, if you look towards the blue wall, you're going to have to be in between the blue fence and the chain link fence. And the bush where it's at the edge of the dip in the grass, that's where the cache is going to be. And so for the fifth and sixth cache, it's going to be hidden in the same style. If you keep running along the blue wall, you will end up finding two little trees together, and in between is going to be the stash. And beyond that point, at the end of the grass field, you'll find the sixth one in between a large tree and a small tree. And so from that point on, if you look towards the tower, there's going to be a tree to the right of it. And so in that little dip by the tree, that's where the next cache is going to be. And so running past the tower to the other long field of grass, not too far, you'll see a cache in between a big tree and a small tree, and it's somewhat of a dip. And so for the next cache, you're going to have to run along the blue wall until you see that they have collapsed. And so what you're going to do next is you're going to take a left, and straight ahead is going to be the next cache in between some trees. And so running along the grass and the dirt, you'll end up finding a tree that is somewhat separated in its own patch of grass. And so facing towards that tree, you have to count 2 over, and then next to that third tree is going to be where the next cache is. So for the next cache spot, you're going to have to go past the first patch of rubble, and it's going to be on the left side of the second patch. To get a better understanding if you're on the right side, when you see the second red object, just go past the left side of it, and towards the end you'll find the next cache. And so for the next one, basically you're just going to have to run towards the wall. The first bush you see on the right is where the next cache is going to be. It's going to be pretty easy to see because in between the two bushes there's going to be a gap, and that's where the cache is going to be. And so the next cache is going to be near the bushes. It's going to be next to a pile of rubble. So the next cache is going to be under one of the highway bridges. If you're coming from the last cache I was just talking about, you're going to have to go to the farthest bridge, going past both of the roads, and just going to the right in the corner of the bridge. And so next you're going to have to go to the right to find a bush next to the fence near the blue hut. And just outside of the bush is going to be the next cache. For the next one, just across the small road into the go-kart track is going to be the next cache. In the nearest bush in the patch of grass, you'll be able to find it. Just go along the edge of the bush and you'll be able to find it if you're having trouble. And so the last two caches are at the power station. Behind the power station and behind the green military trailer, you'll find the cache in the corner between the hut and the pipe. And so for the last cache, it's going to be on the other side of the power station. And on your way to the other spot, there's a group of loot spots where you can loot a weapons case and 2 toolboxes. But just outside of the gate, to your left and behind a bush is where you'll find the last cache. And now for all the spawns. And so for this, I'm just going to give my opinion for every spawn you get. I'm going to explain whether or not you should do a loot run or a cache run, and I'm going to give my personal route for the best option. So for this first spawn, it's actually one of the best spawns to get while you're doing a loot run. Since you're so close to the entrance, you can simply just go in under and be one of the first ones to the tech spots. And that's usually my route when I get this spawn. And so the next spawn you can get is to the right of the original spawn I was just talking about. And for a cache or loot run, I would go for a loot run, but be careful to the right, because people can spawn at the end, which is another spawn I'll talk about. And going up the ramp at that point would be super dangerous, and I wouldn't recommend it. And so the next spawn you can get is literally at the Amicom extract. I would recommend doing a loot run for this, but you have to be really quick. Except if it's early wipe. If it's early wipe, you're basically dead because you're just gonna get sandwiched by 2 people. And so for this one, this is the one I've been talking about that was bullshit, but in a good way, because it's bullshit for everyone else, because you've basically gotten the best spawn out of everyone else. I've only spawned here once or twice. And no, that wasn't because I spawned in late, I just spawned here for some reason. But obviously my route for this is just to go straight into Ollie and then loot from there. So for this spawn, which is inside the walled off area, I would usually go on a loot run, but I wouldn't really go up the ramp. And that's only because there's a good chance that another guy would spawn inside the Emercom area. Instead, I would just go to the right and go up from that. My route usually consists of going to the right and going underneath, and then going down along a hallway until I get to Rasmussen. So when I go through the hole in the wall, I wouldn't really go to the left and up the metal stairs because there's usually people there, and that's why I usually go through the hole in the floor. And so the next spawn is simply just spawning at Power Station. And to be honest, if I were to be doing a pistoling run, I would just loot the power station, then I would extract that hole in the fence. And I mean the whole area of the power station, so I would get actual credit for doing a raid. And for the love of Nikita, don't go in the power station, see the switch that's off, and think to yourself, oh, if I can't have loot inside Interchange, then no one else can. Just turn the goddamn power on, okay? Don't be a fucking troglodyte. Okay, just turn on the power. Alright, and so the next spawn is near the tower next to Idea side. And to be honest, I don't really get this spawn a lot, but my usual route for getting this spawn is just to go under and go into Idea from there. And I don't know if these two spawns are the same, but the next one is a little bit closer to the front of Idea. And it's basically the same thing for the route, but I would just go in the front instead, obviously. And so the next spot is near one of the caches I've showed before, and it's usually under the highway bridge. And so for this one, I would go on a loot run. But to be honest, this is one of the worst spawns you can get. Generally because 9 times out of 10, someone will spawn right behind you, and you'll have immediate interaction with someone. And this doesn't even matter if it's early wipe, mid wipe, or end wipe, it's always like this. At least for me. And so for the next set of spawns, this is going to be in the railway side. This can range from being near one of the highway bridges, to being towards the wall, near the railway extract. And so generally for me, this would be a cache run for me, since there's a group of caches everywhere around me. But you have to be careful depending on where you spawn, because somebody can spawn on the other side and also decide to do a cache run. So for this spawn, I've only gone in it a few times, but I would basically go on a loot run with this. There isn't going to be anyone spawning to your left that often, so I would just go straight through the front door and go to the tech room. and along the way you can loot the cache in the bushes. So for this one, you can sometimes spawn on the highway, but you would usually spawn in the grass area. But from that point on, I would just go straight to Ollie. When I get to the front door, I would usually break the glass because going around has a high chance of meeting someone there as well. And make sure you break the glass to the left, because if you go to the right, you have to go around the rail. And so for the second to last one, you can choose whether or not you want to go for a cache run or a loot run. And this is because no one was really going to spawn right next to you in the corner, or at least not often. So you can decide whether you want to go in or you just want to go do a cache run. And so for the last one, this one you usually spawn in the corner of the map. And so from this point on, I would usually do a cache run, with the first one being the one at the cell tower, and then going to the ones near the trees. Just be aware, going to extract from this point on may not have you go out of the raid as survived, so you may want to kill some scavs or something like that to gain enough XP. So this video kind of took me a shorter time than expected, but I had fun talking about it too, as I should be. If it sounds like I'm tired and I want to die, well, that's only half true, because I'm not really tired. But I was just wanting to make this outro to say, if you want to go roast me in the comments for how bad this video was, then go ahead. But I hope this was a helpful video. I'll hopefully make more in the future, but then again, if I don't, then again, oh well. Hey guys, time for the outro title, or whatever you want to call it. Today, we're doing some kazoo ASMR. Go to sleep.